Thank you very much, and a good Erev Shabbos. First and foremost, there's 20 minutes left to the men's swim. I don't know why you're here. The women, Mrs. Schumacher is speaking in Greenwich. So I don't know why you're here. Anybody who wasn't planning on going to those other two things, why aren't you getting ready for Shabbos? I have no idea why you people are here. Yeah? I was so hoping to come in and find nobody here and go, well, what can I do? You know, I'll have to go back to my room and take a shower and lie in my bed and relax reading the Kichels, which is, thank you very much, the only part of the Mishpacha that I read along with the recipe section so that I can laugh. Anyway, I wonder if anybody actually makes these things, but that's what I do. My wife gets all of the Jewish publications, and I turn right away to all the cooking sections, and I say, what is wrong with these people? Why would they think anyone would do this? But anyway, it is a privilege to be here. It really is. We're here, obviously, for the inspiration. How do I know that? Because there's no Coke Zero. That was the first thing I looked for. There's no Coke Zero, and instead they have Fresca. I don't even know what to say. I'm at a loss for words. So we obviously didn't come for the Gashmias. Anyway, no Coke Zero. What am I supposed to do? But really, a tremendous ashakayach to everybody. I said this when I was here 2 years ago, and I repeat it, that in my opinion, this is the single most important event in Klal Yisrael that we have today. And the truth is, there are other places that have gatherings that are a pale imitation of what we're doing here. Because you mamish have the lineup of some of the, I say some because I know they've had others in the past, some of the greatest mashbiim and mechanchem and marbitzei Torah in all of Klal Yisrael gathered together to be able to provide us with a weekend of inspiration. I'm going to tell you something that the convention does not want you to know. Yeah? First of all, there are cameras in your room, but that's not it. Just kidding. I'm just kidding about that. Anyway, they're only in the showers. But the fact is that we are here to inspire us to go out and save Klal Yisrael. Because it's after the 11th hour. When I say it's after the 11th hour, I mean that 5 years ago, a friend of mine told me he took his Talmidim to see Reb Chaim Kanievsky, and one of them said, is Mashiach coming? He says, he's not coming, he's outside the door knocking. That's how close we are. So it's mamish now at the end that we're going to decide who, the Chazal say in the end, just like when we came out of Mitzrayim, Chamushim, Olu B'nai Yisrael Meretz Mitzrayim, only 20%. It's going to be the same thing in Mashiach. Only 20% of Klal Yisrael is going to come out. And who's going to have that zchus is going to be totally on us. I mean, at minimum of 20%. But it means that everybody that we touch, I have to tell you, I have been in the field of chinuch now for about years, and someone just came up to me now, and I'm so moved by this, you know, that I was in your Discover seminar, you know, in Eretz Yisrael, you know, decades ago, and I became frum, and I'm here now. And I thought to myself, you know, it's mamish, this is it. Everybody has this ability. That's why they want you to be here. That's not why I want you to be here. I want you to be here because when I was running NCSY in Long Island, and Matt Tropp, by the way, was a legend in New Jersey NCSY. So I also did some work in Long Island. But when I was there, I used to have advisor training, people who were helping out. So we had a discussion once about the role of day school kids in NCSY. Now, we're not talking about yeshiva and Beis Yaakov girls. We're talking about people who went to co-ed high schools who would also come. Yeah? And we had the principals of 3 of the schools on a panel, and they all said the same thing. They said, listen, if they're coming because they want to help out, because they want to be mashpia, then maybe there's a reason, you know, like this. And 2 kids raised their hand right away, and they said, Rabbi, you're wrong. We never came to give. We came to get. because there's nothing more inspiring than watching here I've been benching since I was 5, and the average teenager is sick of benching. Very hard for them to really bench. Parents know this. You say to your teenager, did you bench? Because yeah. Can I go? Well, you didn't bench. I'll do it again. Can I go? Because since they're 5, they've been singing, which, let's face it, it's an unbelievably annoying tune. Oh, hey Tiva, make Tiva, ye Tiva, no gum la, no gum lay, no gum lay, na 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 na, and you're just sick of it already. You have to sing at the top of your lungs, or your bunk won't win a watermelon. You know what I mean? From the time you're teenagers, you're sick of it already. So people on the bench goes, I'm sitting there watching some kid with a ponytail and an earring, with a transliterated bencher cracking his teeth to be able to bench, and I realized then what I have. So I say this, and like I say, that's not really the purpose of this Shabbos, but between me and you, we're not here just to give, we're here to get. Because this is, I can tell you, this is my 4th convention. There was another one, but I was only there for the closing, but this is my 4th that I'm actually at the whole thing, which is much better than the Aguda convention, because the Aguda convention only had me once. I remember they called me up, they said, we'd like to invite you to the Aguda convention. This was a lot of years ago. And I said, aren't you afraid that I might say something controversial? And they said, yeah, we discussed this in committee. So we're going to give you the women's shalashudas, because none of the Rosh Hashiva come to that. And we'll give you the closing Sunday morning, because everyone all the Gedolim leave Saturday night. I said, I was kidding. I didn't realize there was an actual meeting. How can we invite Orlofsky and minimize the damage? But anyway, that was the last time I was ever invited. But I think they found out I tell this story. But I know for myself how incredibly inspired I am. And listen, we are the creme de la creme of the frum community who's here. And that's why they have attracted us. But that's not why we came. We came because our hearts are just a little bigger, we just care a little bit more, and we take a look at the matzav, and we're going to walk away from this Shabbos and Mitzvah Hashem ourselves inspired. If we help out some non-from people, that's also nice. But for ourselves, I'll tell you a terrible story. I have a lot of them. Anyway, when I used to teach in seminary, one of the girls coined the term the horror files. He goes, oh no, he's going to the horror files. So there's a shul in Muncie, a shul in Flatbush. I don't know if the Rav wants me to mention the name or not, so I will. It's Rabbi Zucker. And because the rule is don't tell me anything in confidence, okay? I have no filters. Anyway, someone said to me once, I feel like when you're speaking, every now and then you stop to consider whether or not you should say this, and then you say it anyway, so I don't even know why you waste your time. But anyway, he said to me, he says, I got a call from the Aguda. They want to do a lecture series about Kedushas Abayis. Rabbi Zucker says this to me. He goes, and I said to him, what are you wasting your time for? He says, you think that's what Klal Yisrael needs? He says, bring an Orlofsky to do his Why Be Jewish, so that everybody understands why we're doing this. That's what you need to focus on. I said, what happened? Because I never heard from them again. Anyway, but the fact is that we ourselves are desperate. We're desperate for inspiration. I was giving a shir every other Moshe Shabbos in Har Nof, and I wanted to stop it because I had a lot of things going on. Once upon a time, I had a lot of jobs. Now I lost them all through my wit and personality, and now I basically sit around and reminisce. All I'm missing is one of those sweaters, I remember when I was younger, we used to go to... My mother all of a sudden would always say to me, why do you think when you get old you get a Yiddish accent? I said, I don't know. Everyone who's old has a Yiddish accent. Anyway, when I was running around, I had too many things to do. So I wanted to cut out this year. And my friend Rabbi Nissel ratted on me and took me to Rabbi Moshe Shapiro. And he said to me, you're right, you're too busy. You'll have to cut out something else. Yeah. So I got rid of a couple of my kids. But I said, but I don't have time. And he says to me, if you can do anything that gives chizik to people today, you're mechuyev to do it. Because we are a dor that needs chizik. And I thought, what? And the older I get, the more I realize how wise Rav Moshe was in so many different ways. But we need chizuk. Our Dora needs chizuk. And there is nothing that gives more chizuk than this convention. So this is my Erev Shabbos introduction, where I say to you, you are surrounded by some of the biggest lunatics in Klal Yisrael. How do I know? Because I did a panel 2 years ago, which was started at 12:15 in the morning, and the room was packed. I was there because I'm being paid. Otherwise, I would have been in bed by 10 o'clock. I don't understand why frum people would do this to themselves. You people are obviously crazy. And that's why it's Erev Shabbos, you know? It's what you do. Even more than that, there's food out there. This is the most assimilated group I've ever seen. Anyway, that's all my introduction. Oh, are we out of time? Anyway, so these are not the titles are not my titles. You know? I always come up with my own titles, and it's when I used to give this shir in Har Nof, so I had to publicize the title beforehand, and very often there were people who would just like try to learn shot in the title to see if they could figure out what I was going to talk about, you know. But I have a friend of mine who runs this organization called Torah Live, Dan Roth. Some of you kids might be familiar with me as Rabbi Sitter. I'm an animated character. Frankly, if there was anyone who was ever meant to be an animated character, it's me. And a lot of kids watch this. It's cartoon. It's all my shiurim from that I gave for years, but it's just animated, so it's a lot of fun. So Dan Roth originally, how did I get into this? Because he was writing a book on Pirkei Avos, and he asked me to make up titles for every one of the chapters, and then to come up with a title for the book. So he liked my title, so he invited me in to start doing these recordings, and that's how it got started. I didn't make up the titles for this convention. So today is called Bitachon in Difficult Times. I really don't understand what's shot in the title. As soon as I saw it, I've been trying to learn shot in it. And basically, when are you supposed to have bitachon if not difficult times? What's the trick to having bitachon when there's not difficult times? Doesn't take that much bitachon, does it? So I realized maybe that's what it means. There was a famous story about this businessman who his ship sunk. He had a whole lot of merchandise coming in, and his ship sunk, and they were trying to figure out how to break it to him. So the Rav comes to him and says, listen, you're a businessman, and business has its ups and downs, As Jackie Mason says, no Jewish businessman has had a good year ever. Anytime you ask him, how you doing? It's all right, could be better, it's not so bad, so it's always rough. So I said, you're a businessman, it has its ups and downs. It must be, you must rely on a lot of bitachon, to be able to, I'll try to sway over here because I know some people are being blocked by the pole anyway. So you must have a lot of bitachon. I want you to give a shir in the community of bitachon. He says, sure. He says, but are you really about bitachon? He says, of course, Rav. He says, so what if you lost your wallet? Would you still have bitachon on HaKadosh Baruch Hu? He says, yeah. What if your warehouse burnt down? What if your warehouse burnt down? Would you still have bitachon? Thought about it, and he says, yeah. He says, you could give a shir. He says, yeah. But what if that boat that's coming with all of your merchandise sank? Could you accept it, be makabel it, and give a shir and bitachon? Thinks about it, he says, it would be hard, but yes, Rav, I could do it. He says, good, because your boat just sank. He says, what? Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And he's like, what's that? He says, I thought you had bitachon. He goes, that was to tell other people, not for me. It's very easy to give other people speeches about bitachon, but when it, there's always a certain disconnect that we have. I have a friend of mine whose brother, when he went to medical school, the guy who was teaching about lung cancer was a chain smoker. And he's holding up the x-ray. You can see here the diseased lung from this. It's been affected, Okay, But that may give you a certain technical level of expertise, but it doesn't help you when it comes to MS, not when it comes to Torah, because people can see through in a second. My son, I have kids who are smart, I have kids who are geniuses, and then I have kids who are sick geniuses. So my oldest son is one of my sick geniuses. And he had a very hard time in yeshiva because he saw through everything. Everything. He would always make fun of me. Say, but you're just a dumb Baal Tshuva. You believe whatever they tell you. You're so naive. He says, I'm on the inside. I see everything, And he did. It's sad. But anyway, but he would see this, that. So he would say, the Rebbe says you have to come on time. He goes, he doesn't come late. I see him come late here. I see him this. I see him run outside and talk on his phone, taking care of stuff in the middle of class. That don't talk to me. Well, he had a Rebbe in 8th grade. This guy never missed. If you were supposed to be in the classroom at 8 o'clock, he was there at 5 to 8 every single day. And my son was in this spoil that he actually got with the program, in 8th grade. He did everything he was supposed to do. Because he says, I can't catch this guy, Rabbi Mittelman. It was a Masorah. And one night, his daughter's getting married. So he says, I'll get him. Tomorrow he's going to come late because he was up all night at the chazanah. 5 to 8, he was in the classroom. And my son says, okay, I got nothing to say. This guy is real. This guy has consistency. Yeah? Bertrand Russell, the mathematician and philosopher, was being hired to teach ethics in NYU. And it came out that he was a very unethical person in his behavior and different things. So they said, Professor Russell, how are you going to teach ethics? You're not an ethical person. He said, when I taught mathematics, nobody demanded that I be a circle, a square, or a triangle. I can teach it even though it's not a part of me. And by Torah, it doesn't work that way. It's got to be real. So when people say bitachon in difficult times, that means it's easy to have bitachon when you don't need it. Before the real estate market crashed, a lot of people had bitachon. Yeah, of course. Because they were buying things, they were this. I'll give you the Rosh Hashiva pose, hold on. You can use that on my Gadol card if you want. Oh, wait, I'll give the inspirational speaker pose. Anyway.
Delete.
So, listen. What's great at this point is I have no reputation to protect. I am what I am, as Popeye would say. Anyway, so there are people I'll be talking when they don't need bitachon. Right? It reminds me, Mark Twain once said, and he says, a banker is someone who lends you his umbrella and asks for it back when it starts to rain. So it's easy to have bitachon when I don't need it. But when times get tough, when things get hard, we've all had hard times in our lives. Everyone does. And that neighbor that you always look at who has the perfect family and the perfect kids and the perfect marriage and everything is great and everything is terrific, sometimes we see that things, are not as wonderful as they appear. And not that we wish it on anybody, but the emes is everybody has hard times and challenges in this world. It's just a reality. And sometimes you find out, and sometimes you don't find out, and suddenly you find. I had a fellow in my shul when I was growing up. I meet his daughter here in Eretz Yisrael, and I said, "How's your father doing?" He goes, "Much better since the transplant." I said, "What was that?" His kidneys failed years ago. He's been on dialysis. I said, "I didn't know." He says he didn't want anyone to know. He was a doctor, and when he would go on his rounds in the hospital, he would do his dialysis. Didn't want anyone to know. You find people who have financial problems. You find people who have health problems. People who have problems with their families. So many difficulties that we don't even know about. Everybody has hard times. So I remember there was one time I had a particularly difficult time. I was in the middle of a particularly difficult. I remember one time I said to Ramesh Shapiro, he said to me, "No, David, how you doing?" I go, "Hashem no sen layoif koach." He said to me, "Avorak mi sha'ayef mamash." You have to really be spent. I said, I got there. That's where I am. So I was going through a tough time. I had a Hasidic friend, and he sees me, and he could just see it on my face, and I try not to. Rabbi Yisrael Salanta says your face is a Rishus Rabbim. You have to really work hard to Makabel called him a save upon him Yofis. People should know. I always get a kick out of it because people, say to me, they say, "Oh, Rabbi Orlofsky, you're one of those naturally happy people." I said, "No, I'm one of those naturally depressed people. I suffered from depression for most of my life. If I was a kid today, they'd have me on a whole bunch of meds, but they didn't have them back then, so they just said, cheer up." But which is harder than you imagine when you're suffering from a chemical depression. But okay. But eventually I managed to deal with it, And so people say, "Oh, you're one of those naturally happy people." I said, "No, I work hard to stay positive. I work hard to do that because I know that it's important." And so you see somebody, Rav Moshe Shapiro, I did not know him before he lost his daughter. But everyone says he was a different person after that. I met him afterwards, But they say before that he was much more of a brain. He was much more fiery, And they say he was broken. He was much broken. He's coming back from the Levaya, coming back from the Kfura. He just buried his daughter, and he'd been storming the gates of heaven to try to save her life. And he's coming back, and he's bent, and he's broken, and he sees someone in the background. And he walks over and he smiles and he says a few words and then he gets back into the car. And everybody was shocked because what was that? He said he's a chassan and he's getting married tonight. I didn't want him to think I wasn't happy for him. So, okay, so I'm not on that madrega, but but you have to put it forward. So yeah, so he sees me and he sees things are going through a hard time. And he tells me the following story, which was a life-changing moment for me. He says, Reb Levi Yitzchak Beditchev was walking with his Hasidim and he stops. And he says, "If I was a Kodesh Baruch Hu, you know what I would do?" They said, "What, Rebbe?" He says, "Just what he's doing now. Why, you think I'm smarter than him?" I burst out laughing. And I said, that's it. That's it. That's the source of everything. We all think we're smarter than God. Kodesh Baruch Hu, I know you created heaven and earth. I know, Mechadish B'tuva Choyom Tamid Ma'aseh Bereishis, but this time you dropped the ball. And so, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what you were thinking up there. What were you thinking? And that's what I managed, that was changing for me because I realized, every one of us deep down, we think we're smarter than God. And then I said, that's the problem. That's the problem is that I think to myself, if I was a Kodesh Baruch Hu, what would I do? First thing, death penalty for double parking. I worked that one out right away. That's the first thing I would institute if they ever put me in charge. But I then realized I didn't want that job. Lo yanum v'lo yishan. I don't like the hours. You know what I'm saying? I don't want the responsibility. I don't know everything. I'm not, You have to understand. So, Baruch Auerbach, one of Rav Shlomo Zalman's sons, during the week of his daughter's Sheva Brachas, was in a crosswalk. Egged bus ran him over and killed him. It's like a tragedy of biblical proportions, And the whole family is sitting Shiva, and the old Rosh Hashiva of Eitz Chaim comes in with his cane, sits down. I'm ordering, "What are you going to say?" And he sits there quietly for about a minute, then he goes, "No, about 6,000 years, the Eibishter für the Welt." About 6,000 years, God's running the world. And he leaves. So all try to figure out, what was he saying? And then one of the brothers said, "This is a big kasha, but it's not the first kasha in 6,000 years. And there are other kashas, and there are things we look at and we don't understand it. We don't know why HaKadosh Baruch Hu does what he does all the time, but I don't want his job. I have to assume that he knows what he's doing," which is, by the way, the yesod of Bitachon. I'm not going to get now into the relationship between Bitachon and Amunah, but there was a famous story where Rav Shach came to the Brisker Rav, and he says, "Amunah? Well, what do you need? What do you need Amunah?" Anybody who's intelligent and honest can figure out there's a God who gave the Torah. I mean, the evidence is overwhelming. When you talk to atheists and try to get their evidence, it's almost impossible. There's no evidence for the non-existence of God, you know? Or as Dr. Schroeder, who I was teaching with in Discovery, who has 2 PhDs, one in oceanography and one in nuclear physics. Very smart fellow, yeah. When my brother-in-law was working in Discovery, like all geniuses, you know, he didn't know how to use the copy machine. Says to my brother-in-law, he says, how do you work this thing? He says, I've waited my whole life to say this. It doesn't take a nuclear physicist to figure it out. But he said something that's brilliant. He says, you can still be an atheist today, but it takes a lot of faith. You know, so this is what Shach said to the Brisker Rebbe. He says, you know, it's so poshut to believe, to understand that these things are emes. And the Brisker Rebbe said something very sharp. He says, you're right. Emunah starts when it doesn't make any sense. When it's easy, it's easy. Before the real estate market collapses and everybody's making money. Afterwards, I was in Chicago and they were telling me about some lawyer who was making $250,000 a year, you know, scraping by. And now he lives on Tomchei Shabbos packages. Somebody lent me a bungalow for the summer. I had never been in a bungalow. Full disclosure, you know, I didn't grow up from home, and so we used to go to Grossinger's. When people used to go to bungalows, we went to Grossinger's. My parents could not understand why people who live in nice houses would pay money to live like a refugee. You know, sleep in the kitchen. I don't know. I don't get the whole thing. But anyway, so they lent me a bungalow because my wife went to a bungalow and she wanted to relive her youth. You know, it was brutal. You know, I called up my brother. He goes, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm in a bungalow." He goes, "Oh my gosh, what are you doing?" I said, "Sitting on the porch, listening to myself sweat." You know, I don't know. I have an air-conditioned house back in the city. I don't know why I'm here. You know. And my wife, I mean, I got off easy. My wife, all the women are forced to sit in the circle. You know what I mean? You're allowed out to swim, and then you have to come back. You know what I mean? And they all just sit all day in the circle. It's like you know, you're being punished or something. I don't know what it is. You know you're in a bad place when the big excitement is going to Walmart. You know what I mean? Like, you know, that's when you know that you've really maxed out all of your life potential. Anyway, you're sitting at Walmart at 2 o'clock in the morning, you know, 800 from people and one cashier, and you're just standing there re-examining all of your life decisions that brought you to this moment, you know? But, so why in the world am I telling this story? I was in a bungalow, and... Yeah, why? Why was I telling the bungalow story? Oh, that's it. So we go to the bungalow, and the bungalow next to us, there's a guy who's fixing, you know, this and making repairs. So I said, "Oh, listen, could you maybe take a look at my screen door?" He says, "I'm not a fixer man." I said, "What are you?" He goes, "I'm a real estate developer." I said, "What?" He said, "I had a piece of land in New Jersey. I was building condominiums. I had a whole thing going, and then the market collapsed. I lost everything. So now I'm trying to pay back all of the investors any way I can." So the guy who owns this bungalow had lent me money, so I'm coming to fix up his bungalow to try to get back his money. You know, so beforehand, Bitachon's always easy. You know. My wife said something to me. My daughter came in with us. That is just amazing. Just amazing. There was this concert. Oh, that's why, because she plugged in music into my car. And Mordechai Shapiro and Avram Fried's nephew, Benny Friedman, are singing together. So they start reminiscing. They went to a concert in Beit Shemesh where they were singing together, and they realized this was like Erev Simchas Torah. And they said, "You looked at the world at that moment, and everything was perfect. Couldn't ask for better. Couldn't ask for better." And then 2 days later, the entire world is turned upside down. I mean, horror that you can't imagine. I have never seen the film of the atrocities. You know, the little bit I've heard is more than enough for me. I can't handle these things. I'm very sensitive. But the horror of what people experienced, it's beyond belief. To try to be able to wrap your head around it. And the whole world turned upside down. And Israel turned upside down. I have a friend of mine, he's in an organization where they just have people all day making tzitzis. Because they're all these non-from soldiers, they want to pay tzitzis. For the first time in their life. People who never would have considered something like this. Can you understand it? So, I don't know if anybody else does this. Yeah? One of the things I do, since I have no jobs, is I play this little fantasy game in my head. What would happen if I'd go to sleep and wake up? I'd be 5 years old, with all the memories I have now. I could go over my life again and make different decisions. So I'm sure I would eat differently to prevent my type 2 diabetes, or not. I don't know. Certainly I'd have different things to say, different things I would do and experience, It would be... So I said, what if I woke up and I was 30? What if I woke up at this point in my life and I could look it forward? Here's the problem with this worthless game. You can only go too far before you don't recognize yourself anymore. Because you're the sum total of all the decisions you've made. And sometimes I think about history. I live in Har Nof, and you remember it wasn't that long ago that the shul up the street from me, while we were davening Shachris, these Arab terrorists came in, shooting and stabbing neighbors of mine. They were all on my street. I remember when they were paying the Shiva call. All four of them lived on my street, and you just saw the crowds going up and down the street, back and forth, And it was a rough thing. I thought to myself, what if I could put myself back just before it happened and warn the people? And then I thought to myself, would they thank me? I don't know. They died as Kiddush Hashem. They went straight to the highest levels of Shemayim that you possibly could imagine. I don't know. Would they thank me if I stopped that? And if I did, would something worse come down the path? Did this accomplish something? That means, if you're not a Kodesh Baruch Hu and you have to start making these cheshbonos, very hard. Bitachon in difficult times comes down to saying, do I know more than God or not? So, if I was to make these choices, there are many choices that I would make differently based on my understanding. But I don't know what's going on. I had a guy in my Shirin Or Sameach who is an entomologist as opposed to an etymologist. Right? An entomologist studies bugs, an etymologist studies words. And he was talking about how people don't realize when they introduce foreign organisms into an environment how it messes things up. So he says the Australian dung beetle project was one that worked out well. What happened? They brought, when the British came to Australia, they brought cows and sheep, but there are no ungulates, almost no mammals in Australia. There's mostly marsupials. And therefore the bacteria that's used to disintegrate their manure did not exist. So entire fields were just covered with manure. So they didn't know what to do. So the scientists decided to bring in the African dung beetle to Australia, which would then eat up the manure. And he says that's an example where it worked out. Sometimes it doesn't. Because, for example, they brought rabbits to hunt. But the rabbits had no natural predators. And rabbits, as the expression go, breed like rabbits. So they were destroying all of the grasslands and the plants and everything, were eating them up. So what did they do? They brought in a stoat, which is an animal that hunts rabbits. But the stoats realized that it was much harder to catch rabbits than all of the little native marsupials who lived there, so they ate them instead. So now they have these stoats, and they have the rabbits eating all the vegetation, and the stoats eating all the little things. So then they brought in a horse. She died, of course. Anyway, but you don't realize sometimes when you start varying things. I tell people all the time, the Torah is like a fitted sheet. It's not a flat sheet, it's a fitted sheet. You can only pull so much on one side before the other side pops up. So we look at situations and we think, oh, okay, I would have changed this. People who learn Gemara know that before the Chachamim make a takana, it's a very difficult process. And sometimes they make a takana and they realize that what they thought would be a benefit is in fact a chisaron, and they mavatal the takana because they realize it was a mistake. That means when they make something, they've really put a lot of thought into it. And in the words, once again, of Dr. Schroeder, there's a reason they're called sages, he says. They're very, very smart. And so it's easy to second guess and say, if I would do this, I would do that. But do you understand the consequences? What's going to happen if you do that? But we don't always understand where things are going to go. So Kadosh Baruch Hu sees the big picture. We don't. And needless to say, I'm sure if we could have sent the message to the government about what was going to happen on Simchas Torah, we could have gotten somebody to listen to us, because there were these women who were monitoring the wall and everything that was going on, and they warned everything that was going on, and they were ignored. They saw what was happening. They had the evidence, and it was ignored. But what if we had that information and we could get somebody to listen to us and we would prevent it? Would it be better? Sure, if you assume that God doesn't know what he's doing. So Bitachon comes down to a very simple yesod. Kadosh Baruch Hu knows what he's doing, and we don't. And we look at our lives, and we look at the world, and we look at so many things, and we think to ourselves, I would do it differently. But of course, I don't take everything into account. For those history buffs, then you know that the largest battle ever fought in North America was the Battle of Gettysburg during the American Civil War. And there were 50,000 casualties, killed and wounded in that battle. And this was the high water mark of the Confederacy. They made it all the way up into Pennsylvania, into Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. And it was this tremendous war going back and forth. And he had gone through a whole bunch of generals. He went through McClellan twice, and he went through, Hooker, and he went through all of these different generals. And he finally had this guy, Meade. And Meade managed to fight Lee to a defeat. First defeat they really ever had. July 1st to the 3rd. And then Lee realized he lost, and he started retreating. And it started raining. And the Potomac River was flooded, and he couldn't get across. If Meade had rallied his troops and pursued Lee, he would have defeated the army of the Confederacy, and that would have been the end of the Civil War in July of 1863, instead of August of 1865. He would have saved tens of thousands of lives. Abraham Lincoln was furious, and he penned an extremely angry letter to General Meade. And history does not record Meade's response, because General Meade never got the letter. Because Abraham Lincoln had a shita that whenever he wrote a letter, he would put it in his drawer for a week before he sent it. I do that with my bills. But that was his shita. And over that week, he thought to himself, I wasn't there. I didn't have as many casualties as he had. I don't know what kind of state the army was in. I don't know what he was feeling. It's easy for me sitting in Washington to second guess what's happening on the battlefield. And he didn't send it. It's easy for us to second guess a Kadosh Baruch Hu. If I was a Kadosh Baruch Hu, you know what I would do? And that's why we say in davening, it was one of Remender Weinbach's favorite stories. It wasn't his story, but he loved to tell it. This guy falls off a cliff and he's falling to his death and he grabs onto a branch and he's holding onto the branch and the branch is starting to crack. And he cries out, he says, if anyone's up there, please save me, if anyone's up there. And a voice comes out and says, I'm there. I will save you. But first you have to show your faith. Let go of the branch. And he says, is there anyone else up there? There's nobody else up there. And that's what we say in davening. Kaveh el Hashem. And if that doesn't work, Chazak v'yames libecha v'kaveh el Hashem. Because there's nobody else up there. And the Kodesh Baruch Hu knows what he's doing. And at the end of the day, we understand that at least we know we don't know. Ish bar lo yeda. An empty person doesn't know. Uksil lo yevin zois. And a fool doesn't even get that. So, in my experience, I'm not around that long, God knows what he's doing. And there are times when I look and I just shake my head and I say, I can't figure this out for the life of me. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu has it all worked out, and it'll all work out for the best, whatever's involved in that and however it works. It may not be the ending that we want. Douglas Adams, who wrote The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, he had this quote, and someone used to make it his tagline on his email, that's how I know it. He said, I don't know if I went everywhere I was supposed to be, but I think I ended up where I was supposed to go. So I say the same thing. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has everything that is leading us to a conclusion. And in Mitzvah Hashem, we have to chazek v'yames libecha v'kaveh el Hashem and know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will take us where we're supposed to go. A good Erev Shabbos.